Do.
Okay, we're recording.
Welcome everyone to the first of two keynotes here at our Generation Analog 2025 online conference. Today, our keynote is Quinn Murphy of Thought Crime Games, and we will hear from them in a moment. But first of all, we're going to give you a bit of biographical information about Quinn, which I think is warranted. Quinn Murphy's journey with role playing games started when he inherited his brother's copy of Chainmail at the age of 11. He started running games for his friends and hasn't stopped for over 30 years. He's always been writing and designing games and starting doing it professionally in 2009. He's written for a wide variety of products and companies, including but not limited to Paizo for Pathfinder and Starfinder, Wizards of the Coast for Dragon Magazine, Kobold Press for Lost City Kobold Quarterly, Magpie Games for Our Last Best Hope, Onyx Path Publishing, Trinity Continuum, and Eon is the title there. And also for the Ultimate Micro RPG book for Simon and Schuster. He loves tabletop RPGs of all shapes and sizes and loves the thrill of finding the perfect form factor to express a setting or idea and believes that imagination is for everyone. So I want to welcome Quinn into this space and invite you to join me in that. Now we will do the dance where we put Quinn in the spotlight and then make sure that the interpretation is also there. So if I can have some assistance from my team to do to make sure that the interpretation is also in the window. Um, so there we are. Excellent. All right. Quinn, you are good to go.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. Um, so it's 1984. I'm 8, and I'm being escorted by my brother out of our favorite movie theater in the Bronx. Beatboxing, going through some assuredly bad pop locking motions, sloppily shuffling my feet, and my brother catches me uh, right before I'm getting ready to do some ill-fated groundwork on the sidewalk. But it's clear that I'm a boy on a mission. Uh, we've just come out of a matinee of the movie Beat Street, and for the next few months, I'm determined uh, to be a breakdancer. Newsflash, I did not, in fact, become a breakdancer, though at one point my prized possession was a this purple book. I can't remember the title. About breakdancing moves, and it was dog-eared. I read it obsessively and practiced every step in there, and then promptly lost it when we moved. And with it, my passion for breakdancing. But what does happen to me in afterwards is I become aware of what's happening all around me in New York at that time. It's the flourishing and growth of hip hop culture. Uh, for, in my opinion, one of the greatest creative cultures ever known. Um, and from b-boying to DJing to emceeing and graffiti writing, I start taking it all in as an observer, if not an active participant. Um, Somehow absorbing the story of Beat Street had made me um, uh, kind of appreciate and understand that culture as a means of expression for for ordinary people. It felt hip hop always felt like something that it takes a lot of skill to MC and things, but it felt accessible to me, and it's one of the things I've always loved about it. So it's 1987. We've moved out of the city to western upstate New York by Buffalo and Rochester. My brother leaves for college, and leaving his chainmail and D&D books unguarded at long last. I've been dreaming of this moment ever since I was about 5, uh, where I had sort of settled the injustice of not being allowed to read these books in my heart. I'd been watching in this for most of this time, my brother and his friends playing this game with these weird dice, these lumpy lead figures, and a ton of talking. And I'd been wanting into this world forever. So I'm 11 and I'm in that moment, an adventurer opening the treasure chest with a greedy grin. I am more than rewarded. I read about monks, paladins, wizards, thieves. I become obsessed with playing. But none of my friends know how to play, and so that means I'll have to run it. Great, but also my brother's collection has a glaring omission in it. It lacks the Dungeon Master's Guide, which at the time contained about half the rules that you needed to to level up. You needed that book, and all the treasure was in there. So I was running blind, but I just acknowledged that I was going to have to fill in some gaps for myself, and I was going to just have to do my best to get it because um, it was 1987, and there's no easy way to find the book. The nearest place where I could buy it is about an hour away, and they rarely have the book in. But I fill in the gaps I do, and in a few months later, I'm running my own games for friends constantly, and um, yeah, just making up the rules that we need, and having a lot of fun playing and making up these new worlds. At one point, I think to myself, I think I'd like to make my own games one day. And I think that qualifies as foreshadowing. And so I give these two visions and two stories because a lot of people look at hip hop and they look at role playing and they see two completely divergent activities. Worlds apart, right? We've got hip hop born on the streets of New York. DJs jury rigging street lights to power these epic block parties in the street. Graffiti writers creating these multicolor, bright neon landscapes on trains. MCs creating worlds with words. Um, and b-boys and b-girls battling with their bodies spinning and twisting at impossible angles. And eventually a culture of all of these things that will take over the world um, and be in everything. And then we have D&D and role playing coming out of Wisconsin, born of a need to deepen the experience of medieval war games. You're moving your regiment from a regiment scale to a personal scale. Gygax, Arneson, and others sort of making a platform for imagination and allowing you to take the role of fantasy adventures in search of treasure and adventure, and eventually those initial themes spiraling out into all possible different like themes and settings um, and rules. And on the surface, these things couldn't be more different, but I'm a child of both hip hop and tabletop, and they make perfect sense to me. um, and they always have. And it's one reason that I made a game called Five Fires, which is a game about hip hop in the 80s. It is a love letter to hip hop. It is a love letter to Beat Street. Specifically, and it's a role playing game, and we can talk a little bit about that. But I want to lay down some similarities to sort of help bring these things together. First, uh, and it was surprising to me when I realized this, and it may or may not be a surprise to you, but hip hop and RPGs are about the same age. Um, Hip hop's birthplace um, is record sort of DJ Kool Herc, sort of introducing the breakbeat um, and having a big block party in 1973. And then RPGs are about a year later in 1974. So they're actually close in age and therefore born of the same sort of conceptual and material realities of that time, and influenced by the same media as cassette tapes and records and TV, all of those things, and that's important, because another thing that they share is a reliance on what I call borrowed fidelity. You can think of it as sampling or remixing as you like, as taking both hip hop and RPGs are um, they're deeply imaginative frameworks, and they take what they do is they take things that are have come before, whether it be sounds or references from pop culture or history, and then they allow you to use that as a shorthand, and then use language or other tools to reincorporate that and make it something else. To sort of transform that, and they both rely heavily on that. That's something I feel that they both deeply have in common. Um, and that ability to transform, to take what is and look at what could be, or make something entirely new, is also something that has brought both, for different reasons, into political crosshairs. Has brought them under fire for uh, any number of reasons from the status quo. And so, having kind of addressed some of these similarities, I kind of um, want to I want to take a peek at and talk a little bit about um, uh, in depth some of those uh, artistic sort of realities, and how they've dealt with some of and how both hip hop and RPGs have dealt with them, but and in the past, and how we can sort of use those lessons now. Um, but like first, I want to set a kind of I want to talk first about how I feel about artistic expression, because I think that will provide the through line for the rest of what I talk about. So I believe fundamentally that artistic expression is a human necessity, right up there with food, water, and social connectivity. There is a there is a reason, and it's not coincidental that we find um, early humans making cave paintings, right? That as we survive and do these things, we want to talk of as we experience the world, humans are wired to say something about the world. And there are lots of different levels and types of expression, but um, for this talk, I want to focus on two: uh, social expression and artistic expression. Uh, Social expression is, to me, where you are relaying your thoughts and feelings to those in your immediate social circles. And we will say immediate, being some form of online things too. I mean, immediate takes a different tone in our current reality. But um, it's just being able to say, "Hey, um, I feel this thing," or "Didn't you notice that?" And um, you social expression is immediate, and bond forming, um, when it's allowed, right? And um, but in a larger sense, is less durable, because to really, me and my friends have a bunch of in jokes and expressions and knowledge of each other that creates this context that once it escapes outside our circle, it makes a lot less sense in it, and there's a lot less of that context, and so the things that um, make up our social expression in my group won't have the same impact that it will have in your group. So then we have artistic expression. And artistic expression is basically creating an artifact of expression that entails with some level of indirection. It's not necessarily me saying, "Oh, I feel this," but "Hey, I uh, wrote this and it conveys a feeling," or "I drew this and it conveys a feeling," or "I sang this and it conveys something that I want to express." Um, an encapsulation of thoughts and ideas. And that requirement of craft also takes away from some of the immediacy. To indirectly express this thing requires me to filter that expression through craft, speech, song, um, whatever it happens to be. Uh, but the advantage is that indirection and that craft, that artifact, makes your expression more durable. If I take something that I would have talked to with friends and make a story out of it, well, I can then take that and I can send that to other people, and you don't necessarily have to know me or be part of my friend group to understand that. And so I can convey that expression to a wider group of people, hopefully. um, so, bringing all this back to hip hop and RPGs. What's really cool about the both of them, uh, uh, and I'll use I'm going to specifically for hip hop. There's a lot of subcultures and sub forms of expression. I'm going to focus on MC right now. Um, I think it is one of the there are similar parallels um, in the other subcultures, but I think this is the one that I think will A, most people will think of, and B, has some of the most similarities to playing tabletop games. Both hip hop and role playing games um, allow for they provide they allow you to use low friction skills, language, speech um, that can be used socially, where you get simultaneously the ability to do both social and artistic expression, which is not common. That you can, I think, the overlay that I commonly make is a hip hop cipher, where MCs get together, um, sometimes figuratively, sometimes literally in a circle, um, and they take turns delivering improvised or written rhymes um, to in whatever venue they're at, and that's analogous to your group sitting at home playing your RPG of choice and telling a story. In both of these things, we have a uh, thing where we have a few things in common. One, we're taking turns to and synchronizing to take our places to create something. We're all part of the creation, and there's an emergent element where it's greater than the sum of its parts. Uh, but we're creators and the initial audience for these, where we get to, whilst you're creating something, I am the audience for your creation, and then that's going to, the input from what you're making is going to be incorporated into the output of what I'm going to, and um, we add that together, and we make something pretty cool out of it. You know, the experience is one of creation and experience. It's what draws me um, to both over the years. Um, and you know, to get aligned on that level, I think to get aligned on that level, we use for hip hop, we'll usually use a beat. It could be someone beatboxing. It could be actual, music played on back in the old days, a boom box and a cassette tape. And for RPGs, it's going to be we're going to use rules and conventions and um, dice to kind of get us on the same page and align us um, there. And so then what happens once we're making things for this initial audience? We can keep things within our immediate social circle, uh, but what's even better is that we can take those elements, be they rules or the stories of it, or verses, um, or beats, and then we can turn those into expressions for larger community or other communities, and then we um, exchange with other communities, and then they can incorporate um, those elements that we've created, and we can take some of theirs back. And so there's a micro and macro um, set of communities that exchange, and that both created that happened in both cultures historically, until it reached this fever pitch where it breaks out. The exchange of cultures, exchange between communities created a culture which then exchanged, or kind of broke into mainstream culture, and became a phenomenon for both hip hop and um, D&D and RPGs in general. And that is kind of where we start running into some of these political problems, where we hit the status quo, and the status quo says no. That um, what happens is that folks will say, hey, if you don't like what we've got, make your own. But then when people do, those same people aren't happy with that. And then especially when people create something that then comes back and then starts to become popular, there's a lot of resistance to that, and that resistance can take the form of um, often takes the form of political pushback, of criminalization, of when marginalized people um, try to use their expression, there's often an attempt to sort of re-marginalize them. And we've seen that in hip hop over the years in many different forms, um, for in a opposition to um, the initial outpour of it, but then also for you know uh, against gangster rap, or even there's a lot of pushback to Public Enemy and the whole Sister Souljah thing back in the days. It's an ongoing kind of thing. And then in tabletop, we've seen it in the Satanic Panic. That was a big one. But then in more recent years, we've even seen it within the community, as we have as marginalized groups um, have looked for more access, and the hobby has become more diverse, or there have been attempts to make it more diverse. We've seen regressive groups push hard against that, and try and make it so that's not a thing. So then it's a matter of what was done in that situation, and what do we do now? There's a lot of nuance here, and I won't have time to go into the whole history of it, but we can maybe talk about it in the Q&A. But I'll jump straight to the takeaway is um, when the status quo is trying to squash your creative culture, um, you need to internalize the fact that it matters. That means what you're doing really counts, whether you're making it to oppose the status quo or not. It means it matters, and that what it really needs to do is you need to double down and to continue, right? And to if you can't have if they're trying to sort of push on the outside, it's time to go back and uh, make sure you're reconnecting and connecting strongly with your micro and macro communities, and really um, building that thing. It's uh, I feel like in the times that we're living in, uh, where regressive forces are pushing and trying to shut every door in our face, funnily enough, uh, that I'm sure folks have had the thought that, okay, these, little games that I'm making um, don't matter, or maybe that the only way they would matter is if I make one that is specifically about fighting back. Um, and that, again, but again, sort of, I think it's fine to make things in opposition to these times, but I think it's more important to recognize that it will all be painted with the same brush, um, as they will be calling everything woke nonsense, whether whatever the content of it, if it's from marginalized people, and people who they deem not to like, and but more importantly, I think if it's your true expression, um, and what you want to be doing, that is the most important thing, is that to dedicate it to that. So we need not just things that oppose the times, but we need things that express how we feel in those times, and also the things that look forward to a better world, right? In hip hop, when they were coming after, one version of rap, be it, gangster rap or more political rap, people were making funny songs. People were making, goofy songs when they're coming after, Sir Mix-a-Lot for Baby Come Mac, he was making that, and then, Public Enemy was going, is that we, it's a fight, but we fight on all fronts. Um, we fight on the political, we fight on the social, we fight on the joyful. Um, and so I guess it's just running up on time here. I want to just leave with that. Leave you with that, is that um, we should don't bring any shame to your game. Build what's important to you, what's calling to you now. It's if you want to think of this as one big cipher, um, these games we're making and creating, please do. And um, in that, we all have a part to play. We all have a turn to take. Um, and just be ready to take yours, to hear what other people's are saying, to amplify them, right? That's another part of the cipher, is, you're not just, I mean, you shouldn't just be waiting your turn and just kind of blocking them out. You should be hearing and incorporating what other people are saying in there, and feeding off the energy, becoming part of that exchange. Um, Amplify those around you, to as much as you can, and then when it's your turn, um, grab the mic, and let us hear what you have to say. And that's where I'll pause.
Thank you, Quinn, and a round of applause, digital applause both here in the Discord for your work. I'm going to, I think we'll spotlight Melissa, and I guess I will also be spotlighted, and then we will go into the questions, comments, etc. Let me see if I can also spotlight myself. Okay, there we go. Okay, so our first reaction comes from Margareta Yaman. And again, for those of you who are participating, if you have comments or questions for our keynote speaker, Quinn Murphy, please do put them in the Q&A
Oh,
function.
can I throw one thing in here?
Yeah.
Edmund, you actually found the book. That was the exact book you posted it in there. Well done. Well, when I was, it's funny. I was thinking it was so early. I couldn't even remember like fully what it was. But when the second I saw the cover, I was like, that one. Yes,
We'll have to
that
find a
was
copy and send it to you.
And, and,
thank you.
and in the YouTube video of this, Ed, we need to edit the cover of the book so that
Yes,
everybody around the world will get to know what that book looks like.
yeah, that was a formative book of my life.
Books transform lives, everyone.
Mhm.
Margareta Yaman says, thanks you for making these different personal approaches and methodological parallels clear between hip hop and RPGs. One, she sees sort of the parallel between staging and narration, then, changing roles, and each person taking the speaker position, and then, and this forms its own sort of culture of narration. The question is, can you fuse hip hop and tabletop RPGs? How? What are the possible rules of such a game?
Interesting. Okay, so I guess. I guess this is a time. I wanted to talk about it a little bit in the speech, but I had this general point to make, so I felt like I had to like run by it. But I will talk about my own look into this, which is Five Fires, a game I made initially made about a decade ago and have been playing around the edges with for a while. That's the whole other conversation. But the it is like I said before, it's like a love letter to hip hop and to um, like Beat Street specifically. And it's to sum it up um, succinctly, it is a game about people under pressure using art to relieve that pressure, right? So this is a uses the kind of um, concept of that you can see in Beat Street of and really it's part of the story of hip hop is people living their normal life. So like you'll have scenes where you're just kind of trying to solve boring more modern problems like trying to pay rent or trying to impress someone or trying to get a promotion or whatever it is, and it will bring about those stress points in your life. And the only way to get rid of that is in the game is once you hit a certain threshold of stress, then we have special scenes that are about creating um, art, right? And whether you're a DJ or MC, um, they are not literal creations of the art, though it's often suggested, and I encourage anyone who wants to do this to do so. Like, oh, I actually literally make a rap? You absolutely could. You could absolutely make a graffiti piece to express those things, but to make it accessible, there's that indirection. There are sort of group exercises to simulate you writing a rhyme, say, and why they're group exercises instead of personal is that this incorporates some of what I was talking about is that the game assumes that you are expressing to an audience. So when you're going through that writing rhyme thing, you're putting things out, and then people are kind of um, either voting or helping contribute elements, and you're determining one of the things that you're determining is whether your message is kind of niche or iconoclastic in the game's turn, or kind of more general and mainstream or iconic is what the game would call it. And so you use the people at the table to simulate the audience that you create that you're creating that theme for. And then once you go through the exercise, you've created something, and then that piece of um, social expression, then in the game language sort of becomes a piece of artistic expression. Like, maybe you made a song, and now it's getting maybe it gets radio play, or it gets played at a big party or something, and then it can start to take a life of its own. And maybe you get popular and blow up, or maybe you just become sort of a underground backpack rapper, but it sort of um, incorporates not the mechanics directly or tools of hip hop, but kind of takes um, the story and reality of hip hop at that time, and um, creates RPG mechanics out of it. So that's my take on it. But like, certainly, I think there are elements that you could use from the different subcultures to and turn them directly into RPG mechanics, I think.
I also want to point out that Quinn's body of work is not just limited to hip hop related
Mhm.
RPGs. So I'm holding It Wants Souls. I can't
Yeah.
really get I got the blur effect on Zoom, but It Wants Souls, which is a game of horrific possession that you wrote several years ago about a unsuspecting family that now has to survive a house that wants to murder them. And one thing that I think is interesting in parallel with the hip hop and TTRPGs culture is how you bring these ordinary characters very, very quickly into the extraordinary. And I think that's also, when we're looking at the bridge, is that you need to actually use the systems design to manage the fact that people are not directly comfortable with emceeing or other, I would say hip hop is a very high skill. It's accessible, it's DIY, but it's still a very high skill activity. If you're
Right.
breakdancing, if you're emceeing, if you're DJing,
Hmm.
these take a lot of work, a lot of practice, a lot of discipline. And to some degree, in an RPG, we are undisciplined as hell. Like we just, we're out there improvising as we go. And I
Hmm.
think that it's a really interesting space to bring the discipline of emceeing and rapping and with the fun of improvising, which is also can happen in that space. So I believe in you, Quinn. We can we can see even more of you on that front if you want to.
Yeah.
um so I've got a couple of questions. One from Jason Cox. It says, "I love Five Fires. How it makes the creation of art accessible to people who do not normally make it through description and discussion. Have the descriptions ever resulted in tangible artifacts?"
Ooh, I have not heard of. No, actually, sorry. I have um heard of. I can't remember the thing. But I do know. I haven't had anybody made like a rap of it, but I know folks have like gone back and like made pieces of like graffiti there retroactively. Like, the nature of it is probably, the other reason that we don't do live creation of it is that they are, as I'm saying, they are skills and disciplines, and so they're probably more solo pursuits. I don't think anybody wants to wait for like, an hour for someone to make up a full graffiti piece, but after sessions, I've heard of more than a few. Things where somebody like went and afterwards they're like, "Ooh, look at this thing that I made! Like, I actually made the graffiti piece that we talked about there," and that's pretty great.
Wonderful. Next question is, do you have a specific playlist that you've listened to while creating your games? I'm thinking especially community radio in my mind, but do you mind sharing your mixtape or your mixtape ideas?
Ooh, well, it's interesting. So, I mean, I have I, I'm trying to think. Do I have playlists? I will definitely listen to stuff um, on there. I don't have any specific playlists, but I've been contemplating making one for Five Fires for a long time. Um, because it just seems appropriate, and making stuff from the times and from different time periods. Like specifically for that one, I'd want to make like an 80s one and a 90s one. I will, instead of giving a playlist, I'm going to give one song. It is my favorite rap song of all time, and nothing else is really even close, and I think it's worth a listen. And I feel like it encapsulates. It is quoted extensively in the book right now, um, and I feel like it encapsulates a lot of the feeling of Five Fires specifically, but just my how I feel about hip hop. It's called "Respiration" by Black Star, and Commons on it as well. I just think it is one of the best rap songs of all time. It's just great musicality and incredible lyricism, and it paints this incredible picture of urban life and the struggles, and joys and contradictions and paradoxes of it.
Excellent. We've got a number of questions rolling in. Thank you for your great talk. Your talk about hip hop and TTRPGs is from JJ Dorfman. Having parallels in their remix culture, I completely agree. I was thinking about the fact that all art is remixing other art to some extent. Do you have any thoughts about what these two mediums in particular make them uniquely suited to this remix culture? And I'm certain you have a response to this.
Yes. So I referenced there the low friction part, not they're not low skills. They're not like kind of like unskilled, or like the ceilings are quite high, but the floor is intimately accessible in a way that if I wanted to remix a song, right? I don't really know how to remix that. Like my audio skills are non-existent, right? Like I would first need tools, and then I'd need to like learn how to use the tools, and then I'd probably need to learn a few other things just to really get started with doing something half listenable to with it. But because hip hop and MCing specifically and RPGs are born of language, and sort of dialogue and conversation. They are things that we have in there. Again, there are a lot of skills that we can pick up and techniques to get really good at it. But we can start, especially with a little guidance, easily. And also, I think it's encouraged by the fact that language is by its nature low fidelity. And one of the reasons I used fidelity for the term instead of just remix or sampling is that um, there's this sort of um, immediacy and sort of clarity of kind of imagery that we use, right? Even though we use words in hip hop and RPGs, where it's really about imagery, about what you're seeing in your mind. And um, but since your mind is kind of the console and the graphic renderer, um, if I try and just use visual details like, hey, here's a guy with a black helmet and black cloak, with this red tube in his hand, right? Like I can spend a lot of time offering visual details and we might not sync. But if I borrow something, if I say, you see Darth Vader, right? That is, I borrow that from the visual things that, many people have seen. From Star Wars, and I get to borrow that and then use it to create in your mind something immediately there. Like you can paint the visual in your head now, and hip hop does the same thing by using the different punchlines and different references and words. You borrow something from here, create it in the mind of listeners. Um, there. So I guess that's the particulars of that, why they're particularly good at it to me.
And Chris Chin has pointed this out many times online, but Wu-Tang Clan are extreme nerds. They really are, they have this kind of tough front, but if you listen to their lyrics at all,
Super nerds.
they will become, uh much nerdier than you possibly could imagine. They are among us. I don't always agree with Method Man's misogyny, but everybody else is people, right? Is
Mhm.
one of us. And I would encourage you to listen to hip hop through a creative lens, because there's so much there that is even just in terms of content, in terms of exploration, for future creative ideas.
Yeah. And then it's interesting too that there is now like a whole sort of genre of things that are like when Wu-Tang was coming up, being actively nerdy wasn't a thing that you have to kind of go the couple of levels to be like, wow, these guys are nerds, right? And now there's like whole genres of it where it's like you don't have to. It's right there on the surface. Like you don't have to investigate or interrogate it at all to just embrace the nerdiness.
Yeah. Zohab asks on the subject of joy. He's working on tabletop RPGs with a South Asian perspective.
Mm,
He's dealing with the problem of how you can write South Asian material in a way that the majority Western, often white, tabletop RPG community can use, and use quote unquote acceptably. Our current approach is to be radically accepting and inviting people in to have fun with our material, not worrying about what they really do with it. Trusting that being open makes people want to engage with joy and respect. I wonder how this tracks with other conversations around culture and marginality. What does being open like this require for your privilege of security, or is there a necessity? Is it a necessity to do this sort of work, no matter what the risk might be for appropriation?
mm. Yeah, so this is a thing that struggled with a lot, and maybe still sort of struggle with um, in terms of Five Fires specifically. The One of my big fears, to be perfectly honest, was that I would make this game and that I would hear something that it would be that I would hear it represented by maybe some white group in a way that like doing something with it that would be like completely like appalling to me, right? Like that would be, or that would just be very grimacing, right? Like that I would present in a way that I would, and that the game would somehow offer people a way to do something um in bad faith with it, and then sort of like give them a stamp. And like, well, we just did what the game told us, and it was um that, and that was kind of a thing that I was uh afraid of for a while, um, and how I got through it, and what choices I made was, when you read the game, you'll see that I one do not use, I don't use a lot of jargon of the time. It is plainly written, and it and uh, that's on purpose. Um, because that sort of language you're going to use will be reflected by people in the game, and that it's too easy to for people to use jargon as a costume and sort of cosplay, and then just kind of miss the point in there, and that when you give people that jargon, they'll use it. So I wanted to be very explicit about the terminology that we use, and so I do my best to tell the story unadorned, so that people can take it, and anybody who knows it and is immersed in it will see clearly the lines that anybody who's there and has experience or knows the stuff will um, be able to fill in the gaps. But other people who are not will be able to approach it in a way that is by design respectful. right? And that we don't, because I can't be there to tell people like, yes, this is this is a terminology, but like, you don't use it in here. Like I can't police all of those things, so um, it will make it seem less authentic for some people that I'm not using all of the jargon and the terminology. Um, and that's fair. Well, I don't think that's fair. But I understand why people would think that. But for my goals, if I want to make it accessible, but not problematic, I feel like that's the best choice.
And this reminds me of a Golden Cobra game by Yunsu Julian Kim called Last Train to Busan, which bans
Mhm.
the use of kimchi in the K-pop game. Like there's all this other K-pop references, but basically Yunsu said it's explicitly food jokes are often a gateway to racism, and so we're just gonna like bracket that out. So often there's a way in which, in your position, you can already parse what language is going to be used or abused already at the table in
Mhm.
this medium. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Mhm.
I've got three more questions before we wrap up.
Okay.
One is in your hip hop game and related, how do you make the distinction between exploring and appreciating hip hop culture and appropriation, or keeping the players from descending into stereotypes and mocking other culture through the game? So this is similar to what we were
Mhm.
looking at earlier.
Yeah, I mean it's I've played for people of all different backgrounds and connections to it, and one of the things I do other besides the language thing that I've talked about, um, is that a large part of the game is actually the initial part of the game is making your own city. Right. And so as a group exercise, we're going through and we're creating, rather than using cities as setting cosplay, and say, hey, here's a version of New York, or here's a fictionalized New York where we're going to inevitably we're inviting problems and appropriation and stereotyping. It's create set a ground floor that we've all sort of agreed to, and set ground rules for, and then play within that space. Um, so kind of build your own sort of wall around that, has been really uh, helpful. Those two things, I think, from what I've seen and what I've been playing with different people, that helps kind of alleviate a lot of those concerns.
And our next question is, and this is one that I'm percolating on already. Would you say hip hop, not classically trained musicians, martial arts, not classically trained fighters, and tabletop RPGs, not classically trained actors, philosophers, or scholars, are all in the same boat?
Hip hop. So hold on, can you repeat that? So
Yeah.
are we?
So it's hip hop versus classically trained musicians, martial arts versus like military or combat training, and tabletop RPGs versus say theater performance or philosophy training. Are we all in the same boat as a sort of, improvised or amateur shadow version of something else? I, of course, have a response related to jazz, but I don't want to, you know, uh,
So are we,
yeah.
so are and the I think I know where the question is going, but I'm trying to clarify, so I'm actually answering it. Is it like the kind of so like is it the amateur versus professional?
Yeah, I think that's where it's headed.
Okay.
Amateur versus professional.
For the hip hop versus classically trained, I'll say, I will first point to the roots, where they are all deeply trained, musicians, like every one of them, from the MC over to the theme. That there's, I, there is, and I've said this a few times, but there's a low floor to getting started on these things, but the skill ceiling is infinitely high, and especially when you're comparing when you compare the top um, people in hip hop to say top classically trained thing, the amount of effort. I will put Kendrick against any classically trained musician, right? I will put Black Thought against any classically trained musician. They are incredible. They can do things that no one can, and their training and skill. Um, I guess those distinctions always sort of pose that the institutionalized learning is one, not accessible in those things, but then also superior, and I don't agree with that, but I do think there's a middle ground in this sort of intermediate where I think the classically trained probably is, stronger, right? But like it helps sort of make a stronger middle. But I think at the bottoms and the tops, I think it doesn't make any difference.
Yeah. The clarification is creation of a field from a general lack of resources. So it's those with
Okay.
no resources versus lots of resources. Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. I think that's a kind of thing too. Like I think the it's interesting, the institutionalization and the resources. I think also kind of tends to create a um, calcification there too, right? Like to then break out of what's classically known, then it's like it's harder to get out of that box. But
and and my own interpretation is some of this high culture pop culture distinction is rooted in violence, right? And also racialized violence, where
mm-hmm.
the Astor Place riot of 1849 in New York City, which really cements the high culture and pop culture can't mix. And of course, most U.S. pop culture is appropriated Black culture, so
Right.
there's a lot of underlying violence to how we get these terms, and it's best
Mm-hmm.
to then take everything on their own terms. Last
Mm-hmm.
question. You mentioned in designing Five Fires and games in general that people should focus on creating something that very directly responds to the issues they mean to address. When creating, do you tend to focus on representing yourself or your experiences, or then sort of a larger group or culture? And how do you walk that line between the self and the group? Do you feel you can be too specific or not specific enough?
Mm-hmm. So when I'm making a game, I'm always speaking from kind of the place I start from is what I myself need and want, right? And then when I start to think about others, um, and sort of I do my best to not have my games speak for anyone else, um, uh, but to maybe allow folks to see themselves in it. So to create, so there are kind of I'll use it, this is a thread line in a lot of games here, but since we've been talking about it, I'll use Five Fires as the reference. Um, for Five Fires, I have these thoughts on what is important to me in hip hop, and I have this sort of core philosophy, but I don't want to kind of say this is necessarily how hip hop is. But I need to represent that in the game, but then also create this space for people to bring what they want to bring into it too. And that's I guess that's sort of the 1-2 punch of how I do it, is sort of here's what I want to say, and here is the white space for other people to say what they want to say.
And thank you so much, Quinn Murphy, for answering our questions and giving us a lot to talk about. Again, there is more to discuss on the Discord, and
Yeah,
we are so grateful that you decided to spend this hour with us, talking about things you've created and things other people can create with what you've created. So thank you so much.
thanks so much for having me. This is great.
All right.